Let's imagine that you are standing backstage waiting for your turn in an audition. If you win, it's gonna change your life. You will be famous, loved, adored. But firstly, you gotta go there and sell yourself. You checked your competition before you had gone here, so there's nothing to worry about. But suddenly, there's him. He's bigger than you, stronger, and has a ton of fans. He proved himself already, so when he steps out on the stage, there's only applause that you can hear. You know you gotta beat him somehow, and yet, it seems impossible. One way or another, the stage is yours after him. That's the best analogy to Lies of P situation. You see, Souls-likes are pretty exotic. What do I even mean by that? Well, look at From Software Souls. Would you put any other Souls-likes next to them? Well, I doubt that. And here lies the problem, or maybe the challenge for Lies of P. Making a good, faithful to the core of Souls-likes game is certainly hard, and it's even harder when the only competition you have is the studio that made it even a thing. Although the recipe for them seems simple, hardly any can be considered as a good one. There is very few good Souls-likes. I might even risk a statement that there are none. None made me enjoy the story, the lore, the gameplay on the same level as in From Software titles. So here is the challenge for Lies of P. It needs to reach a similar level of game design to From Software, but also be far enough from it, so it won't be a clear plagiarism. Now that we understand it, let's get to it. Way before I even pressed the download button, I was already taken by this game's idea. Let's be real, it itself was a recipe for success. You play as Pinocchio in a Souls-like, with bosses in a grimy and harsh world. A world that we all know, a world that we know as bright, colorful and fairy one. In my book, it sounded quite ridiculous. You know, just imagine how I would explain it to anyone. This goes to show that the plan the developers established for this game's setting is truly interesting and inventive. But hey, this still means nothing. It could turn out just like the movie in time, which indeed was a great idea, but let alone how it was utilized. So off we go into the game itself. An unknown, at that moment female as befits Souls, resurrected what is supposed to be Pinocchio. Then the game made me quickly go through the basic controls and choose a starting class, and as my favorite playstyle is swinging with huge ass blades, I think it's obvious what I've picked. So I hopped out of the train, and in the next 30 minutes, the game didn't make me quit. Of course, there isn't much to say after that little time, other than, yeah, this game is definitely difficult. However, being absolutely honest, right at the start, Lies of P didn't give away any impression that it's these developers' first project of such size. And if you don't know it, that is exactly the case with this title. I couldn't deny that the combat was decent. I couldn't deny the views. I couldn't deny that I've seen it somewhere. And okay, let's hold your horses here. Without a doubt, The Lies of P is a clear love letter to Bloodborne. To be honest, it seems that it got into a relationship with all of these Souls games. Bit by bit, my list of similarities grew longer and longer. Most of them were minor things, but hey, still. This game tries hard to be Sekiro with the parrying mechanic and forcing an aggressive playstyle. Souls with the combat structured in a way that shoves you towards learning attack patterns and abusing dodges. Bloodborne with the health regeneration mechanic that you lose as you get hit while blocking. There was even an attempt to recreate the interconnected locations where every once in a while you are pleased with a shortcut or an occasion to come back to a previous area. Let alone the fact that there had to be a swamp chapter or parkour level, which is always a pain in the ass with those clunky and unreliable controls. And don't forget those big rolling balls. But you know, even with all those things considered, I want to make something clear as fuck, and you better get that right. The unique artistic route the devs have picked for Lies of P shines with its own identity. And here we gotta be honest, is it bad to look up to the greatest? Well, no, under one condition. You take inspiration but twist it, play around with it so that it makes up to its own formula, and that's what Lies of P seems to do just right. Okay then, let's rewind a bit. So here is me. I've freshly finished Sekiro, and my developed instincts in that game told me to use the same strategy in Lies of P. At the first glance, it isn't that bad of an idea. I've already mentioned that there is parrying and somewhat of a need to be aggressive. Moreover, there is a hidden posture bar that once filled mainly with parry and landing hits lets us repose the enemy and deal huge amounts of damage. Well, that is different than in Sekiro, but it quite reassembles the death blow. There's no denying that the game wants me to parry enemies' attacks and literally rip into them. That right away tells me the obvious elephant in the room, which is, ladies and gentlemen, Sekiro. But at one point, one question arose. Why that approach doesn't work entirely? So here's the thing. Even though it's a mixture of all Souls, it has its own set of rules and principles that make it a completely unique combat system. And although it doesn't really reinvent the wheel, it is different. So parrying isn't as rewarding as I thought it is, mainly because combat has a lot of inconsistencies with its tempo. Some enemies' attack patterns are structured in an atrocious way that make some of the fights chaotic and lacking rhythm. They throw a 7-hit combo at you, then proceed to have the fastest charge up for an attack just to wait 10 business days to actually decide when to swing. And things like that make blocking or dodging as essential as parrying, and small changes to those mechanics make a huge difference. On top of that, there's a few neat things that this game brought. We have special attacks called Fable Arts. We have a unique weapon crafting system. We thankfully have impactful throwables. We have Legion Arm. We have refillable Estus Flask. And it's all there because Lies of P shoves you towards experimenting. The more you experiment, the easier this game gets. Simple as that. The combat is also affected by some of the arguably controversial choices. There is no poise, that means even the most rusted puppet can knock our character to the ground. There's a skill tree where some basic abilities are hidden behind it, like rolling up from the ground. There are no shields, with a small exception, or armor that you can wear. And overall though, it makes this a different, special kind of experience. Now, I gotta say a word or two about how decent adaptation this game is. Obviously, it's not exactly a faithful adaptation, and that's good, because nobody expected that. There is the Pinocchio spirit in this world, though. As I traversed through the city of Krat, it made me believe that this kind of Pinocchio universe could somehow exist. Puppets is my main enemy, a lying mechanic that plays a big role story-wise. You know, when a game adapts a particular source material and makes me willing to deep dive into its details and actually look for reassemblances or Easter eggs, I think it tells me enough about how well it has done the adaptation. The lore is ridiculously ambitious. Not only is it mysterious and ambiguous, but it tries to do some Marvel type shit. I don't want to spoil it much, but we should expect another game that adapts a different fairy tale that is somehow connected to the universe presented in Lies of P. I must confess that this is really ridiculous, but at the same time it's ambitious. And as the time went on, I got to the point where I wanted to explore this world, to get to know why puppets turned their back on humanity, to deep dive into Krat, because Krat is definitely one of the most beautiful steampunk cities created in any game, and I could spend hours in that city and not get bored. Although in this game, the narrative is rather linear and leads you by the hand, I recon that it turned out for the better for Lies of P. There is still room for theories, your own assumptions, as there's a lot of understatements, but also you get to understand what happens around you and presumably makes you more immersed. So with all those things considered, what would be the final verdict for Lies of P? The truth is that Lies of P, with all of its ups and downs, is finally a decent Souls-like. Maybe not on the same level as From Software's, maybe there's still a long path to go for Newis. That doesn't matter, I enjoyed the ride with it, and we surely have a prospect of a new contender that can compete with From Software. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. Okay, I think I got a bit poetic and all that, you know. Please subscribe.